Hey guys, and welcome back to Hoosier Hardware. Today we're taking a look at the process that I use when I'm looking on eBay for really putting together PCs that have great price to performance. That is, putting together cheap systems that I can either turn around and sell for a little bit of a profit, or if I just want to give them away. I've given a couple of my friends in the past different computers so that they actually have something that is pretty solid to game on. So with all that in mind, I'm going to be hopping over to eBay on the desktop computer here and walking you step by step basically through the exact search terms and the exact way that I find these deals, and then in my mind sort of put together a roughly $200 PC that's going to be great at 1080p gaming right now, and actually will probably be okay at it in the future as well. This thing isn't so-called future-proof by any means because we are using older hardware, but it is going to keep whoever takes this PC gaming for at least a couple of years to come, obviously, as the games get more and more demanding to run. Settings will have to be reduced, but for the most part, these PCs will still be gaming in 2 or even 3, possibly even 4 years down the road, and all that considering they come in at a price that is cheaper than current consoles are in the first place, or right around what a current console could be found for, $200-ish. I don't actually know if current consoles cost that. I think that's roughly where you could get them at. But anyways, I digress. We're gonna hop over to the desktop and go step by step through this entire process. And yes, I'm actually clicking the buy button on some of these parts, and you'll see this PC that I put together. I've actually already put it together. I'm recording this last, but you'll see this PC in the very near future on the channel. So with all that said, let's hop over there and take a look. Alright, so of course, if we are gonna be doing this sort of search for used parts here online, the place that I'm gonna use is gonna be eBay, and that's mostly because it's pretty much readily available for anyone that wants it. So with all that said, we're gonna go, and the first thing I'm gonna type in is computer. So that's just gonna give us a very basic and generic search here, and in fact, I can actually probably get rid of that search. What I'm really looking for here is actually the computers, tablets, and networking search. And while I'm sure there is an easier way of doing this, I'm going to go down now in this category, and I'm going to look for PCs, desktops, and all-in-one computers. So we're going to go into there, and I usually do this by processor type because I find that even though not all listings are perfectly accurate for this, this is going to give me the best chance of uncovering something that I'm looking for or something in the right price range. So I'm going to go ahead and check off these i5s. I'm also going to hit up the i7s for the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th gen. For the i5s, I guess 5th, 6th, 7th, just in case there happens to be something this is just a really great deal, but for the most part, there's probably not going to be in those more recent generations. I'm going to click on Buy It Now. Now, if you are willing to wait around and potentially wait on auctions, you can definitely do the all listings or just the auction tab in general. And I'm going to sort by pricing lowest to highest. Now, on the memory side of things, I'm going to click See All here and check 4 and 8 gigabytes. So now, obviously, the sorting is not perfect. Obviously, we have a heatsink there, but we are just going to kind of scroll through here and look for systems that present us with at least a reasonable price of performance sort of ability here. So basically what I'm looking for here is the mini towers or even full-size towers. Most of the time I'm going to avoid these small form factor ones, and that's just because I would have to about recase them to get a full-size graphics card in them, and usually it's not something I'm overly interested in doing. Now, there is this Optiplex here, and there will be several of these when you're looking through these computers, and this is obviously a bare bones system. So there's no CPU, no RAM, no hard drive, which the hard drive is not a big deal. I've got hard drives for days right now because I got those 10 1 terabyte hard drives for about $100. So those are super cheap storage for me right now. But what I don't like here is we're getting a bare bones system with the shipping being $28. That puts us pretty far up the chart. I don't really want to be there. I do like these Lenovo systems, and that's because they can actually be recased fairly easily. The M91Ps, I believe, and I just sold one of these very recently. There are no inside shots of that. Since it's only 4 gigabytes of RAM, also with no hard drive, that's a cost. That'd be adding about $15 to the system. I could probably get a 4 gigabyte stick of RAM for $4 to $10, and then my hard drives, I value my own hard drives right now at about $10 a pop. So I'm gonna keep kind of scrolling down through here. This one might be an option. I saw this one a little while back when I was scrolling in my free time, so I'm gonna open that one up. And thing about this system is, and I know this is really petty, but it looks like it has, especially around that the sort of handle there for pulling off the door. It looks like there's some damage, though it also just might be plastic because the plastic is still on this system, so it just might be bubbled up plastic. I really can't tell. The first time I was looking through this, I thought that was like some sort of chipped paint or damaged or something. And the more I look at it, that might just be plastic. So if you look inside of this being one of the 3010 systems, the downside to these ones are there are only 2 RAM DIMM slots there, which isn't really a big deal. It's already got 4 gigabytes of RAM. I think what I would probably do there is pull those 2 sticks of RAM. Oh, I lied. That's only 1 stick of RAM that's actually in it. So I would probably pull that 1 stick of RAM out and put a single 8 gigabyte stick of RAM in, just because that's what I kind of already have. So I wouldn't actually have to buy anything new. It does come with a hard drive, 500 gigabyte hard drive. The power supply, I'm not going to be able to tell exactly what's going on with the power supply there. I've used some of those power supplies before for lower end graphics cards, like ones that don't take a lot of power. The alternative to that is I could just replace that. So I'm going to put this one kind of on the back burner because this would not be a bad system, I don't think, as a starter, because we're looking at $75 or so. By the time I pay tax, if I have to pay tax on it or anything like that, I'm looking at right around $80. But on the bright side, I do have a hard drive, which if it's a good hard drive, I could just leave in there and not have to add any of my own hard drive storage. I'd still probably add a 120 gigabyte SSD there. But the nice thing about this system is everything seems to be accounted for. The fans actually look quite clean. It looks like the system was probably clean to begin with. So I wouldn't have to do much work on that side of things. And I may be able to just basically drop in something like an RX 470 and a 120 gigabyte SSD for another $20, which would drive up the total cost of the system would be sub $200 at that point. And I could potentially flip it, sell it for like $250 maybe, and make a little bit of money on it. There's not a ton of money to make on systems like this, but there is a little bit if you can get a complete system like this. And yeah, so I'm going to put that one on the back burner and sort of keep scrolling along here. So the next challenger here is this Lenovo ThinkCentre M91P. I just sold one of these. I don't particularly like the aesthetics of what Lenovo has going on here, and that's mostly just because this sort of power button just kind of sticks up there. I think it kind of looks a little bit dumb. It is nice for using as a little bit of a handle to sort of lug around the case when you're working with it and that sort of thing. There's no inside pictures here, so there's no way of really telling what it looks like on the inside, how dirty it is, that sort of thing. Let's see if they list what kind of power supply. So we do have an i5-2400, so it's probably not a great one to use just because that Dell system that I looked at earlier would be a little bit better. The Dell systems seem to have a little bit stronger power supplies than a lot of these Lenovos do as well. And the Lenovos on top of that, at least some of them, I don't know if this particular generation of one did this, but a lot of them need like a power adapter if you're going to use a standard 24-pin ATX power supply with it. So that one wouldn't be a terrible candidate, especially if you could make an offer at like $65 and get it for $65 to your door. But I'm not going to touch this one right now just because I can't see anything inside of it. So just sort of moving on here. Okay, so we have an $80 computer after shipping here. We have this sort of same thing here, 4 gigabytes, but it's 1 stick there. Could easily replace that. Basically the same thing going on with this one as that other one. The big difference is we have a 3220 versus a 3470. Except this one has a much larger hard drive, a 2 terabyte hard drive, and if that hard drive is still good, that's a really nice storage setup there. I'd actually, if it were me, if I bought this system, I think what I would do is probably pull the 2 terabyte, put a 1 terabyte in there along with a 120 gigabyte SSD, just because, again, with a lot of these sort of lower end systems, I don't know that that 2 terabytes is going to see much of a return on my investment. Whereas if I pull it out, I can always put it in a more premium system later on down the road that makes a little bit more sense than putting a 2 terabyte drive into a budget PC. But this is definitely an option as well, so I'm going to leave that open. So I've actually seen this listing before, and this is a Dell 3020 bare bones, and it includes absolutely everything except the RAM, CPU, and hard drive. It does have it listed as coming with the drive caddies as well as the heatsink for the CPU, so you would literally just need a CPU, RAM, and hard drive for this system. The reason I'm going to avoid it, there's actually 2 reasons. The first one is it uses an 8-pin power plug on the motherboard, whereas the 3010s, like these ones, the Ivy Bridge generation Dell Optiplexes, used a typical 24-pin ATX power connector. This one requires, if you're going to put in a different power supply, an adapter of some kind, because Dell switched to a more proprietary 8-pin power plug for the motherboard there. But the other big thing is the Haswell generation CPUs are just significantly more expensive right now than something like a 3470. Right now, I believe you could get an Ivy Bridge i5 for about $30. It's going to cost more like $50 unless you find yourself a really good deal just laying around for a Haswell one. So even though the bare bones system itself is $40 shipped to your door, it would actually, to me, be more attractive if it was a 3010 with all the specs the same, having the heatsink and the drive caddy and all that jazz. So while this is not a bad deal, and if you're looking for a Haswell system, a way to go might be something like this, I'm going to avoid this one for the moment. I'm going to start looking for GPUs now. So I'm going to open up yet a new, sort of another tab here. And with my GPUs, I'm basically looking for RX 470s, 480s, 570s, and 580s, because frankly, they are just the best values right now on the used market. Now, I typically start with the RX 470s because obviously they are the least expensive, and I really feel like they give the best bang for your buck, though I can go ahead and sort of open up these other tabs with these other searches. So I'm going to go pricing on the low end and then buy it now prices. So some of these are probably like this is just fans only. This seems to be an ASUS mining card. That's a mining card, so I'm not really interested in that. DVI out only. I'm not interested in that, but I'm sure there will be a lot of people that do. And then we get to the ones that I'm at least kind of interested in. We have an RX 470 here. It's a 4 gigabyte card, has a back plate. It's a single fan design, but you could pick it up for $66 flat. If you go over to the 570s, and if we sort things the exact same way, you're going to find, I believe, that the 570s typically are just a bit more expensive. So we're looking at more like $85 for these 580s by the time you actually get it shipped. So like I said, the 400 series, the RX 470s, RX 480s seem to be a significantly better deal right now than are their 500 series sort of brethren. Moving over to the 480s, which will outperform 570s, by the way. It's worth noting. And also worth noting, these cheaper ones are the 4 gigabyte cards, not the 8 gigabyte versions, at least typically. So here we have, for right around that $80 mark, we have a RX 470. We have an RX 480 here for about $90. Looks like 90 is going to be about the 480 price point that we're looking at for the most part, outside of these ones that aren't working. Move over to the 580s, they're going to be a little bit more expensive. I think a lot of these are going to be over $100. So probably not quite as interested in these ones. Though this one has free shipping. It's a 580, 4 gigabyte card. Used card, works fine for about 2 months. So wow, that's actually a really solid deal there, if that's a legit thing. Got the nice cooler design, man. $80. So I might actually go and buy that one like right now, because a 580 at $80. Yeah, I'm gonna copy this link and go buy this. Okay, so I just went over and purchased this card after tax. It was like $85.60 or something like that. So that card to me is a really solid value, and that's just because it's a 580. Sure, it's only a 4 GB version, but it's a 580 going for about $85 on eBay. That's a fairly solid deal, I believe. You'll notice a lot of these other ones are going off for anywhere from $95 to $100, and they typically don't have as good a cooler as those twin frozers. So what I'm really curious to see now is whether it will fit in one of these Optiplexes. So that is an $85 investment there. And I'm going to go back over here then, and I'm not really interested in some of these 470s and that sort of thing anymore. So yeah, I am back on this system here, and I think I'm gonna go ahead and pick up this system because it's gonna be right around $80. So with the $80 system plus an $85 GPU, then I'm already right there up to about $165 or so dollars. I'll add another $20 to that when I add a 120 gigabyte SSD. I'll probably just use this hard drive, the 500 gigabyte hard drive, leave it alone there. So I'll be looking at a $185, $190 system that will be able to play pretty much anything at really solid frame rates. At least at 1080p. So I'm actually really quite excited about this. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this link, head over to Chrome so I can order this on my account where I'm actually logged in, and then I'll be right back. All right, now that I have a graphics card and a Optiplex here to work with, I'm going to go and see if eBay has anything for SSDs. I don't know that I expect that they will, but I feel like it's worth checking out just in case. Same sort of thing here. I'm just going to sort of sort from the least expensive and see if they have anything sort of like this. I don't know how I feel about this. Health performance at 87%. Wow. I'm probably not going to buy this just because I would rather go and buy something brand new that I know is going to have a nice long lifespan left. And this is kind of what I expected. So this may be what I'm looking at here. And I've bought lots of these before from Amazon. I love these inland drives because they're just so cheap, and they do a fine job. They're a basic, typical SSD. That's what they are. They just work. So I'm gonna pick one of these up, and it's gonna cost me right around $20. So our system right now is looking at, like I said, about $185, and there is a decent chance I will not be able to adapt power over to that RX 580. So there's actually a decent chance that I'm gonna have to do a power supply swap too, which I currently have one in my own sort of stock here. It's a Dell unit that has a little bit more voltage available, or rather more wattage available to it. It also has a 6-pin PCIe plug that I can adapt very easily to an 8-pin plug that would handle that RX 580 just fine. So I think that's probably the route I'm going to go with, which is going to increase the cost that much more, because that was a $20 power supply that I picked up recently. So what we're really looking at here is a $205-ish build. I'm guessing I'll post it for about $300. It may sit for several weeks, and it may not. And I'll probably end up settling around $250 on the whole system. So it's not going to be an overly big moneymaker for me, but if nothing else, it'll be a build that I can make a couple videos about, test out, put it through its paces. It's nothing that you haven't seen from me before on this channel, but hey, that's just sort of how it is. This is the system that I'm going to roll with for my next used price to performance build that I'm going to turn around, flip around, and hopefully sell off for at least a nice little bit of profit. But of course, we'll see when all the parts start to arrive and when I can start sort of piecing it together. I am really happy with that RX 580 buy though, for $85, a 4 gigabyte 580. Normally they are significantly more expensive than their 480 cousins, but that wasn't the case today. I was able to pick off a decent value there. And that's how I do my price to performance shopping on eBay, because I live in a somewhat rural area, a place that doesn't have a lot available in terms of a very huge used price to performance market. There is a decent sized city near me, but it doesn't give me a ton of options like even larger cities do that other people may have easier access to. So that's kind of how I go about trying to put together decent builds for very cheap costs. It's something that you could totally replicate in the future. Just keep in mind that not all of these pre-built systems do accept modern GPUs, and that's a really big thing. I recently unloaded one that does not accept a modern GPU. Fortunately, I was able to get roughly what I had in it back out of it, so I didn't really lose anything, and that's just sort of a heads up on me that in the future, those second gen i5 HPs don't seem to want to take a modern graphics card. So with all that said, I'm going to get on out of here, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I do want to know what you guys think. How do you feel I did with this particular build? Do you like the value that's presented here with a 580 and a third gen i5 with what's going to eventually be 8 gigabytes of DDR3 RAM? Or could you do better if you were given eBay and a computer and sat down with the same about $200-ish budget? Let me know your thoughts in those comments down below. If you like the video, give it a like, share, subscribe, comment. All those things are very helpful to the channel. You can follow me both on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. And as always, I'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.